and welcome to this episode of 100 Days of ServiceNow. I'm your host, Cathey Alexander, and today we are joined by one of my favorite people in the ecosystem. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Jeff Cathey is one of the best storytellers I know. His empathetic nature informs his leadership, his generous spirit, and his work with customers to deliver exceptional ServiceNow outcomes. Jeff has worked in tech sales leadership in various capacities at ServiceNow and currently at GlideFast Consulting. So I wanted to invite him on this episode of 100 Days of ServiceNow to talk about the 3 C's of servant leadership to win in career and life. So without further ado, let's welcome my friend, my mentor, and colleague, Jeff Cathey, to the stream. Welcome to 100 Days of ServiceNow, Jeff.
Hi, Kylie. How are you?
Doing well. I'm so delighted to have you here and really looking forward to this conversation. Before we get into servant leadership, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I've been here at GlideFast for a year and a week. Very fortunate to be here at GlideFast after having served combined now, the better part of the last 7 years in the ServiceNow ecosystem. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm a native Arkansan, but
Razorbacks.
But I've embraced everything Texas except for the Longhorns. Certainly the Razorbacks are who I'm a fan of. I've been married to my wife Shannon for 26 years. I have a 23-year-old daughter Kylie and a 17-year-old son Carson.
Right on. You know, Texarkana kind of grows you up in a particular kind of way. I'm curious a little bit about how that informs your leadership, your interaction and engagement with customers.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I grew up in very rural South Arkansas, very much a blue collar mentality, very much a help your neighbor and even help a stranger mentality. Growing up there, sometimes you're far removed from the city and maybe having the things that you need. You just have to be resilient, work with others to achieve and to have. And growing up there, I wouldn't trade anything for it. It's helped form me personally and professionally my entire life.
You know, there's something about that kind of small town living where you know your neighbor. I think my sister's in the chat. We grew up in a type of community where you visit people by going to their back door, right? And whenever someone would ring the front doorbell, I was like, wait a minute, who's that?
It's like the same where I grew up.
It makes me think about how that upbringing gives you perhaps, I'll call it a white glove type of engagement with customers. That small town background must really go far with how customers receive you.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, growing up where I did, and everybody was, you may not have been friends with everyone, but you knew everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't escape people knowing your business and things like that growing up in a small town. So you got to learn to communicate. You have to learn to get along. And it seems very simplistic talking about those things forming you professionally, particularly when we are in tech sales. But at the end of the day, regardless of what it is, personally and professionally, so many times it's all about people. It's all about relationships and how you can communicate and understand with one another, for sure.
You spent some time in the Army National Guard as well. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I did that, Kylie, after college. I was a 91 Mike, which is, I guess, your grade or your job title, which was a hospital dietitian / cook.
Okay, then.
Yeah. So, interesting time. Never was deployed to combat, but with summer camps and trainings and being a cook, I know for a fact I can cook 2,000 omelets in a couple of hours, provided I have enough eggs.
You know what? That really fills in the blanks for me because we were recently talking about how you were throwing down just this past weekend for Super Bowl Sunday with all the wonderful things that you were making, because you was talking about you made these pork ribs, and I was like, oh, pork ribs, and you was like, but Kylie, that ain't it. What it really is that next day when you take those ribs, you get some new potatoes, you get some eggs, and you put that in a tortilla. See, now I understand. I see the line. I see the through line on that.
Well, for sure.
Talk to me about sports because I know you're a huge sports fan, but you're also a bit of an athlete yourself.
Well, I used to be. Played everything in high school growing up. Played football and pole vaulted in college. Now that was 30 years and maybe 50 pounds or so ago. But always have been drawn to sports. Many of, and what we're going to talk about today, servant leadership coaches that I've had, beginning with Lester Harris and Frankie Gathan and Mark Perkins and Denny Rosenberg, Tommy Barnes, so many good men in my life that were servant leaders that I had a front row seat to see how it is to servant lead.
Jeff, what is servant leadership?
Servant leadership, I think, is a leadership style, a way that you carry yourself that prioritizes the growth, the well being, the education, the enablement, the empowerment of others. I think that servant leadership, it certainly doesn't require a title. It requires a mindset and a want to make your situation, the situation for those around you, as good and as best as it can be. And a lot of times, to make that happen, somebody has to take the reins and drive that forward. And it's what I've always tried to do professionally.
Taking that level of accountability, you mentioned that it doesn't require a title, that it requires a mindset. What I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate about the way you frame that is that it allows everyone, wherever they are in their career, regardless of their title, this is a practice that they can adopt and put into practice in their own lives. So I think that's really powerful. So for the folks out there watching, keep in mind that it doesn't matter your title, it doesn't matter how long you've been in your career, or if you've been here, just got here yesterday, if you've been here for decades, this is something that will help you to grow both professionally and in life. So I know you broke down the three C's, Jeff. So what is the first C of servant leadership?
Well, there could be many C's, but these three are my favorite to employ and use in practice every day: compassion, character, and competence. And compassion, I guess, is the first one I'd like to talk about as it would relate to sales and selling. Will kind of be the view in which I talk about it, but certainly it can be applied in everyday life, anywhere, everywhere, with anyone.
Okay, so when you talk about compassion, you talk about servant leadership. I don't want this to be lost. You are also a leader in tech sales. What role does compassion play in that capacity?
So to talk about it from a customer and as a seller, I guess kind of standpoint first, you have to be genuinely interested in the customer and their outcomes first. You've got to be mindful, you've got to be cognizant, you have to understand that. I think ultimately with compassion as it relates to sales is we as sellers have to get into a position to be able to understand the customer's pain or their vision and solution of what success looks like and how they're going to measure that. How do you get there? Again, you've got to be genuinely interested in the customer and the outcomes they want. What organizationally does the customer's company get from me? What does the customer that I'm actually dealing with and speaking to, what do they get personally from it? And so I think you have to ask very candid and probing
Hmm.
questions to get to a level of detail and understanding, of the customer's issues. You have to have the active listening too. If you can't active listen, that's a problem. So you'll often see me on sales calls and whatnot. I've always got my notebook. I'm always writing notes. Active listening, is very important there. But back to the compassion part, you really have to get in and feel what your customer needs, and you have to put their success certainly before your own. And I think that it's one reason that I've enjoyed working at GlideFast for the past year and a few weeks. the whole servant leader mind share, the compassion, character, competence. Mike Lombardo, that founded our company, he was a practitioner early on in his career with ServiceNow. You think about how we are tasked with and measured with, customer first and on time, on budget. They're happy and driving a good CSAT rating for us, which, hopefully we will have earned, and be in good favor with the customer. All of those things, I think, are relatable and a part of how you need to be compassionate to be an effective seller and not just a vendor, but a partner
You
to your
know,
customer.
when I hear you speak, it makes me think about professional empathy. You talked about you have to put your customers' needs first, about kind of like flipping the script and like what the priorities are. It's not the priorities of the me, but it's the priorities of the customer, the person that's sitting across the table.
Right.
Empathy seems to be a big part of how you engage and even what you recommend, even beyond tech sales, but what you even recommend career. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
You just have to be genuine and authentic. People don't want to be sold. They want to be educated, and they want to make a decision. If we're talking about compassion professionally, I think in having been in leadership, people don't want to be managed. They want to be helped. They want to be guided. They don't want to be managed. They want to be helped. They want to be guided. Empathy goes a long way in both scenarios.
Thank you for that. Let's talk about the second C of servant leadership. So we have compassion. What is the second C that you're going to share with us today?
This is my favorite one, actually, and it's character.
Character. Bum, 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 bum. See, I'm giving some air horns for that one because that is a super important one. Tell us what you mean in the context of career and in life, the importance of character in the three C's of servant leadership.
Sure. So character includes a lot of different things with how you carry yourself, how you act, how you're perceived. Some of those are like trustworthiness, accountability, resolve and resiliency, creativity. Those things come to mind when it comes to character. Those things are very important for when you have to show character. I'll give you an example. When everyone and everything is great, it's going very smooth, there are no problems. Everybody and everything is great at that point. But what happens when adversity strikes? You
Hello.
know, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about, with customers is, projecting and being sincere. And you don't know unless problems arise, but you can trust that Jeff Cathey, that Kylie Alexander, that GlideFast, we're not going to run and hide if there's an issue, or we're going to work to
Mm.
minimize and try not to have any issues happen, of course. But we're all human at the end of the day, and issues do sometimes come up. And so I think how you had a great leader one time, Chris Mills, he was like, you have to run to conflict. That's where your value really shines for a customer. And character empowers the bright side or the good of any situation. Those things are what character means, I think, to me, and how character should be conveyed to the customer. Like, hey, I need you to know, and I want you to know, you can count on me, you can count on us if and when things go bad. And I think if you employ that, your worth and your value to your customer, and even how you think of yourself, will be very positive and favorable.
Let me ask you about this. You just said something that really hit. You said leader Chris Mills, when I shot him out, talked about your value shows up in running the conflict.
Hmm.
How do you, I'm thinking of someone who may be new to the ecosystem. It was October of 2022. I just want to backtrack just a little bit, where CEO and president of the board, Bill McDermott of ServiceNow, talked about his initiative to scale up 1 million people in the ServiceNow ecosystem with his ambitious plan called Rise Up.
Hmm.
And there are probably lots of folks who are listening to this session of 100 Days of Service Now right now thinking, okay, how do I run conflict, or how do I build the grit, the muscle, the backbone to run conflict when I'm just now entering this ecosystem? Can you share a little bit, because you've got a lot of experience. You've had, I'm like took notes, National Guard, college, played sports. How does someone entering this ecosystem or entering their professional career right now build the capacity to be able to run conflict?
So many of the greatest lessons I've ever learned in my life, personally and professionally, have come from bad situations. It causes pause, it causes retrospect, it causes you to assess, what happened, how did I react to it, or what did I do, and what was the reaction, to that, and oftentimes those bad situations, how you deal with it, that's going to form your character. Things aren't easy a lot of times. Sometimes when things go wrong, and I think in terms of building character, and it's one of the hardest things to do, is to be vulnerable to yourself. Is sometimes very hard to do. Many of us in sales are uh, alphas, or very self-assured, or very confident, and to make yourself vulnerable to a situation. Oh, you know what, this is my fault, or I contributed to the issue. You have to have enough self-confidence to be vulnerable, to learn and improve from it, and then to whomever the issue affected or hurt, you got to be vulnerable with them too. And I think that the things that I said that make up character, trustworthiness, accountability, that sort of thing. How do you build capacity? It's doing those things. It's being vulnerable to self and others, and just being open to learning and improving. I think every day. Yeah, I know if I were buying, I would want my seller to have that kind of character.
I love that. It also makes me think that even though we may just be new in career, early in career, certainly we've had, a few decades of experience in other environments where we could have or had opportunity to start to build those strengths, building that backbone, getting those reps in so that you can practice at once being confident as well as being vulnerable. I love the jewels you're dropping here. Let's go to our third
Sure.
three C's of servant leadership. We have one, compassion. Two is character. What is your third C, Jeff?
Competence.
Competence. Bum, 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 bum. What do you mean by competence in terms of the three C's of servant leadership?
Sure. Competence, I think, is something that's very tangible when it comes to product, navigating issues, legal, well, any number of things that a seller may have to deal with and navigate. I think it's also an intangible, in terms of how you get there, be it business acumen, the ability to lead, to take action, to be decisive. It goes back to the compassion and character that I talked about earlier. Competence is many different things. Again, it's in tech sales. It's about your product, your outcomes, your how, your why, and then the intangibles are all of the things as you look to and you think about what we do here at GlideFast. Right, we have customers and sometimes many customer representatives that we are working with on problems and projects and goals. On this side, we've got ServiceNow and their sellers and their solution consultants and leadership. And then we have that of GlideFast internally. So, you have to have a great competence from like an intangible standpoint of taking, cross-functional teams, three different organizations in lead, guide, direct as the implementation, the advisory, the partner, working everything and quarterbacking, to use a sports term, everyone together to work toward that same common goal and to get there, in a same common fashion. It's a character can come back into play there if you have differences of opinion, and sometimes there's friction when you have that. Competence is being able to drive, and servant leadership is being able to drive all of those people, all of these different teams and companies and personal maybe goals and objectives in the same direction toward the same success.
I like what you're saying because in this way, it's a win for everybody, right? It's a win for the customer. It's a win for the colleagues that you're working with, and it's a win for yourself personally. So I love how all of these things kind of fit together. From the three C's that you lay out here, from compassion, character, and competence. You see how they really work together. Jeff, before I let you go, can you
Sure.
kind of give me a summary of like what are those three C's of competence and how we might apply them in our life and in career?
Kylie, that's a heck of a good question. I think ultimately, in simply, it's living by, selling by the golden rule, or if you were to reference Matthew 7:12 in the Bible, it's doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think if you take that approach, if you have a mindset, right, of servant leadership and have that underpinned by the three C's: compassion, character, competence, you'll find that your day, your life, your career will go so much better, that you will contribute to and hopefully be looked upon favorably by your customers, your colleagues, your family, your friends, etc. Servant leadership, again, is a mindset, not a title, and so much of it is rooted just in how you treat others.
Well, Jeff, Cathey, I want to thank you so much for joining this episode of 100 Days of Service Now. Folks, are you okay with people following you, Jeff, on LinkedIn?
I would love to. The more the merrier, Kyle.
Listen, I have left the link to Jeff's LinkedIn, so be sure you check the description of this video and be sure to follow Jeff because he has so much information and so much goodness for you that I know that you will grow from. Jeff, thank you so much for being this episode of 100 Days of Service Now.
Kylie, thank you. And for everyone out there that attended, thank you. I
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, bye-bye.
Listen, don't go nowhere. Don't go nowhere. Why don't I want you to go anywhere? Because I want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up on the next few episodes of 100 Days of Service Now. So next week, we have Lynn Ballerini. She's going to be talking about 5 insights into HR in a post-pandemic world. That is going to be on Tuesday, February 20th. And then the very next day, on Wednesday, the 21st, I'm going to be joined with a repeat guest. Actually, I've interviewed him twice, once at the Knowledge Floor, Knowledge 23 floor, and then also earlier or actually last year now. So we're going to be joined by Corey C.J. Wesley. He's going to be talking about the winning mindset. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the good work that the ServiceNow.org is doing. We're going to be here with John Batstubner of ServiceNow.org. So there's a lot of stuff that is coming up, and I cannot wait for you to hear all these wonderful things that these guests have to say. So until next time, stay kind and be curious. Bye.